been a long, long day. I got a lot to say. It feels like I'm carrying a 2-ton weight. I go to see a friend.
Hello, I'm Msgr Patrick Winslow.
And I am Father Matthew Kauth.
And we are speaking from the Rooftop,
a podcast brought to you by 10 Books, in which we invite you to join our conversation out here in the open air,
where we look out upon the world around us from the rooftop of the church and share with you what we see.
Makes me wanna scream from the rooftop to the screen.
Good morning, Father Winslow.
Good morning.
How are you?
Well, so this morning I went to put on my shoes, and I took note of the fact that I used to be able to lift my legs up to put my shoe on. And actually, I had to grab a hold of my ankle with my hand and pull it up close enough for me to put my shoe on.
Yeah, but this is level 3, because there was a time where we actually bent down and put the shoes on.
No. I think it's becoming an extreme sport. Just trying. I don't know what happens at night where things just lock in place. Do you remember that one time we both had plantar fasciitis?
Oh gosh,
it was an epidemic.
Couldn't walk down the stairs.
And how did we both get it at the same time? We
were walking around the house as if there were nails everywhere.
And I'm like, and I looked at you and I said, "Do your feet hurt?" and you said, "Yeah. Oh my God, they're killing me." And I said, "Mine do too." And then we started realizing that we both have plantar. But the thing is, there's nothing contagious.
Yes, we thought we got some disease.
Right. It's like, what are the odds?
Oh, the body's a funny thing.
Well, remember Betty?
Oh, gosh. The glorious Betty.
Yeah, she used to say that aging is not for the faint of heart.
It's an extreme sport.
It is an extreme. Well, you think about aging. I remind people that in the gospel it says that we are to become like little children again. And there's nothing like the foil of the body to make you feel like a child. You become more dependent.
Of course.
You become more limited. Simple things become complicated.
There's something rather merciful, I suppose, about the entire thing. I think about my dad, for example. He died, as you know, very early. And he was a very strong man, a very sort of a man's man. And toward the end of his life, he developed Addison's disease and some of the complications. And it so rocked his world, he wasn't able to do almost any of the things that he did prior to, and was fearful of doing them because it's a kind of a disease that does attack to some degree your serotonin levels and various things. And so what was fascinating for me to watch was the way in which the Lord sort of humbled him by taking away his sense of his own power. And so there was a certain mercy about the entire sickness that I can't pretend as if I'm strong. Not that one should desire to be weak. I mean, strength is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. At the same time, wrongly employed, it certainly becomes one more platform or house of cards that we stand on, thinking that somehow I can build something on my own. And so the striking of the tent, those are the dogs.
Those are the dogs of the hell.
The striking of the tent, as St. Paul says, is kind of a merciful reminder. I think about it in terms of memory as well. Because the body doesn't. Give you an example. So when I played basketball with the guys, it was rather.
You mean back up in Linville?
Well, that too. But when
I said to you, Kauth, you are not 20 years old. You were playing with a bunch of 20-year-olds.
And I still do.
No, and a half hour later, you were checked off in an ambulance.
Well, the problem of a tendon that ripped. Well, actually, just
a serious problem that led to major surgery. And but my words were prescient.
They were prescient.
You are no longer 20.
And I'm still playing. The problem is now the recovery time is like 2 weeks for one game of basketball.
For a bruise.
But the thing about the memory is that I can still play perfectly well. Like the memory doesn't catch up to your body.
No.
It doesn't say, oh, by the way, you aren't capable of playing basketball. So I go up for a shot that have certainly made millions of times, as it were. And then instead of staying in the air while I'm doing the shot, I'm back on the ground like a third of the way through the move. And I'm just staring like, why am I not in the air?
Well, see, I discovered that I have the same problem, except it's not doing some sort of layup. It's actually just walking in a straight line. Because in my later years, I've had to deal with some vertigo where the inner ear gets out of balance, and oh my gosh, I must look like a fool. I'm, very carefully trying to put one foot in front of the other, as though I'm walking on the deck of a ship in the middle of a storm.
That's a good analogy. There's something rather noble about growing old, insofar as, before I was doing it, of course, this is the kind of age in which we worship youth and prowess and things of that nature, and belittle and concern ourselves almost not at all with those who are aging or our wise ones, our elders, etc. And now that I'm becoming one, I want all that kind of respect, obviously, because I'm getting older.
What are these young whippersnappers?
Yeah, but there's something rather heroic about it. Like, you think to yourself, there are people that live their lives constantly in difficulty, and they realize that whatever this pathology is not getting any better. Even if it's just a bad back or a bad ankle or foot, and they live their lives. And it's rather heroic, really, in some ways.
The church treats old age and aging as a serious illness. I mean, it's a condition that warrants anointing of the sick. You talk about having, a grave or serious illness as a condition that warrants being anointed, receiving the sacrament, which is primarily intended for the soul, but at the occasion or the moments in which the body is particularly suffering, so as to better unite one to Christ and to have this suffering to be redeeming. And, we say in the Latin Church that one has to have some type of serious illness to be admitted to the sacrament of the sick. And right there in the Prenotando of the Rite, it says very clearly that aging is basically a cause, or you should say, could say itself an illness. It is acceptable to reach a certain age and say, I'm perpetually in a state of needing the sacrament of the sick.
Right, absolutely. Well, we don't see it necessarily as some sort of thing that's remedial, that you're engaging in something that can be redemptive in some sense for you. Because death, of course, is, as St. Paul says, on the one hand, the wages of sin. On the other hand, we could also say that it's sort of natural for any composed substance to be able to fall apart, as things do in nature, right? That corruption, generation. And yet we do hold that it's not natural for us insofar as we were given a preternatural gift to be able to sustain the body. And so the death isn't, in that sense, perfectly natural for us. And so aging is, you think about, there was a poem I read one time where it said that wrinkles, and they were called the harbingers of death. Like they're the ones that remind you that the body's not going to snap back anymore. That line that you saw every time you smiled, it just stayed. And it's not going away anymore.
Well, it is. So it is different to look at yourself in different decades. My philosophy is...
Oh, heavens. Change your mental picture. Yep. I remember that.
Change every single decade and change your mental picture, because you're different. You look different. You just are. And, I tell my mom all the time, I say, Mom, once you reach the age of 70, being thin is not healthy looking. It just isn't. I mean, it may be healthy. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but but the reality is having a little plump on you makes you look healthy. Otherwise that gaunt look combined with the aging process, that's a hard look to pull off.
Well, maybe it's like a baby, right? The Lord makes babies so nice and plump because if they fall down, right, they get all the padding. Exactly. And maybe it's sort of the same thing, that ultimately, as we get a little older, he's like putting pads on because we're going to fall.
Exactly. The problem is I'm not 70 yet. So I'm padding too soon.
Yeah, padding too soon.
But when I get there, boy, I'll I'll pat away. Give me my bags of candy and leave me alone.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You know, you're talking about the culture and youth. Sorry for my voice. I don't know. It was a little scratchy. I think it's because we were talking a lot last night. But we were talking about the youth and how our Western culture really sort of prizes and idolizes the young in many ways, and not so much the elder or the wisdom. But yet, it's my understanding, and I don't know for sure, but just based upon my experience, that in the Asian cultures, there tends to be a great prizing of the older folks and the wisdom that they bear. You know, it seems to me that we could learn a bit from a culture. Now, in some cases, like with my father, where senility starts to kick in, you know, the wisdom is tamped down a bit. But in cases where you have clarity of mind, and there's a wealth that can be drawn upon.
Right.
You know, I look at these older people that are retired, and you know, what's behind their eyes? What have they done in life?
Right.
What have they experienced? So much can be gleaned. Of course, again, with my father, he doesn't want for opening his mouth and trying to tell you all the lessons he's learned in life. I just ask his grandchildren.
Well, there's something to it, right? I mean, even in the history of art, when the virtues are depicted, for example, the cardinal virtues of temperance, justice, fortitude, and prudence, it's interesting to see how traditionally those statues that are representing those virtues are depicted. And in the case of prudence, I remember thinking to myself, looking at a statue once in Italy, and I thought, I have no idea why this thing is so odd-looking and grotesque, because there was an old man's face on the back of a head and a young woman's face on the front of the head. Odd. And I was trying to figure out what in the world this statue was representing, and I guess it's a fairly common depiction. But the idea, of course, is that when you're looking back through your history and your life, you're aging, so you're collecting those memories that give you capacity for prudence because you have more experience. I mean, I think it was Aristotle that said you shouldn't even teach until like 40 or 50 because you don't have any experience to be able to bear upon a situation. Whereas your face in the front, because you're entering into something that's perfectly new for you, it's youthful, it's young. And so maybe the lesson to be gleaned is that the beauty of getting older is that you have something that brings to bear in a new situation that you didn't have before. We say about ourselves at this point in our lives oftentimes that it's kind of a peak moment for the investing of the talents, of the coins, because you have enough experience to be able to make right judgments, or better judgments anyway, about the present.
So you have some coins to invest.
Yeah, and then at the same time,
what do you do with them?
We haven't gotten to that point where we don't want to invest anything because we're just too tired.
Because the body can't do a layup and it just falls to the ground. Yeah, no, I get it. So what then? I mean, looking back, let's imagine you and your young face looking forward, and now looking back. On one point or another, where do you think you got something right, and where do you think you got something wrong? I mean, this isn't supposed to be true confessions.
No, sure.
But for example, myself, I would say that when I was looking forward back then, I didn't take practical matters to heart. I just didn't. So I didn't think very practically. I didn't think about like my next assignment. I didn't think about the consequences of a given assignment. I just didn't think about those things. And now I look at some young people and they do, and I think, boy, I just wasn't like that. But at the same time, I'm not saying that it was prudent or wise for me to ignore those things, right? I think that I might have had, I might have been better had I paid a little more attention to some of the practicalities. Now that I get older, because of the memory that I bring and the experience, and I now say, okay, when I consider a situation, I look at all the practical elements, but that is a result of having learned And I can tell you, all right, on the front end of my life in the priesthood, coming through seminary and out of seminary, I just didn't really look at those practical things. I just kind of shot. I just shot, I guess, to the skies or to the distant horizon.
I think it's dovetailing on what you're saying. It's ironically, I think one of the things that I actually got right, that lack of consideration can also kind of free you, because you're not trying to weigh all the possible ramifications and consequences of a given action. And so you're sort of hopeful about anything you do, and often wrong about your capacities, but nevertheless, the future is sort of your oyster, right, as they say. And so I think the one thing that I got right was trying to throw myself at what I consider to be the highest thing. I just wasn't really satisfied. I wasn't satisfied with the various options that I had before me, even though I thought the options were fantastic in themselves, the things that I was shooting for in terms of my life's project. And yet when I got into them or tasted them, I said, is this it? Is this all that life has to offer? And so the one thing I did get right is I was sort of tenacious about trying to throw myself at what I would consider to be the highest possible use of my life. And that I think I did, and I think you did too, just relative to the priesthood.
No, I'm thinking like, where I was terribly impractical. All right, let's go on a trip to this. Okay, hop in a car. And then you arrive, 8 hours later. You're like, oh, I really didn't think this through. There's no place to stay.
Sure.
And it's just like terribly impractical. But you're right. I think that there is an aspect to it that is getting it right. Because, I mean, this is where we touch upon the vision of faith as a supernatural virtue and hope and that interplay, because it gives us the capacity to see that eternal horizon that only the eyes of faith can see, and allow you to make track adjustments in the here and now according to that horizon. And without that supernatural gift of hope, dragging that eternal future into the present moment, then you're without the proper bearings ultimately.
Yeah, that's true.
And you're rudderless. Well, maybe not rudderless, but you have the wrong rudders.
Yeah, the wrong rudders. Yeah,
and so that gift of hope is extreme. I've had this constant dialogue about hope. This is a French author. He'd been an atheist, part of the Enlightenment movement, early part of the 1900s. And he had a conversion to the Catholic faith, and he was a poet, an author. He wrote a trilogy on faith, hope, and love. And they're long poems, like 140 pages each kind of thing. But they're written in French, but they don't depend on like a rhyme scheme. So it's not Shakespeare like that. But it's actually sort of a poetry of images. So it translates fairly well, even though translations of such a thing will never, ever be like the original. And I can't read French, so there's no way I can read the original. But I do read a translation of it. And it's really very beautiful. I think that the images and the concepts, for me, they really come to the fore of the page. And I find them very provocative and interesting. And back in seminary, when I was finishing up, right before I was ordained, we had that eschatology course, and I did. Were you in that class with me?
I was, yes.
Yeah. Eschatology.
Dr. Castorella.
Yes. And of course, he gave us a term paper, and I completely missed the mark because I didn't write a term paper. I wrote a 25-page reflection on on this poem. But so I remember when I got my paper back, he's like, "Great, really great paper, just not the assignment."
Exactly. You made it work for you.
Yeah, I made it work for me. Oh, yeah, that moment. But to be honest, one of the best papers ever written, because what it did
impacted your
for
life.
Reflection, it had a real impact. Yeah. And so that notion of hope and what the supernatural gift of hope can do from the practical perspective is to grab a hold of eternity, bring it into the present, and it changes the way you see the current moment. So I could be in a circumstance and it could be kind of dark and grim, and I don't have a lot of options, and things seem like a little bit despairing. But if through the supernatural virtues operating in me, especially that of hope, can see that eternal horizon and pull it into this moment, then suddenly the lens through which I perceive the current moment is different.
Right.
It's just different. I can see these things as crosses. I can see these things as the possibility for redemptive suffering.
Right.
I can see that there's good, that somehow God has a plan.
Right. No, that's exceptionally important. I think that even on natural hope, prescinding from supernatural hope, imagine, to use an example, it's summertime, right? So now we're on summer vacation. Mm-hmm. And if your summertime is filled with basically sort of a vacuum, there's not a whole lot to look forward to.
That was the dog, by the way.
There's not a whole lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Imagine, though, if your summertime means that in 2 weeks, you're going to go on this trip with your friends. Or in 2 weeks, the person that I haven't seen for a long time and can't wait to see is coming. Mm-hmm. It fills your present with a kind of excitement and a longing and a trajectory that fills it. And you get moving forward. That's the image that Piggy had. I remember of the three sisters, right? Yes. Faith, Hope, and Love. And Hope was the little girl between the two big sisters of Faith and Charity. And she was holding their hands, in some sense, leading them forward, bringing them into the future. Yep. And so when we're talking about supernatural hope, talking about actually filling that emptiness, realizing that no spot in time is without redemptive possibilities and glory and merit and participation in the divine plan and providence. I mean, it's wonderfully exciting. Filling the present with something that's real, as opposed to just trying to fill up time, or, as we say oftentimes, wasting time. But time becomes pregnant with purpose. If we were to say, though, the downside, as you mentioned, because youth is the time in which to throw yourself at something because you're excited to do so, and it's when grand gestures are made, it's when marriages are supposed to happen, and vocations are beginning to be lived, etc. And aspirations are high, because we realize that we're not all that we thought that we were. It doesn't happen as readily when we get older, and in some sense, I would say that's the very thing that I got wrong, oftentimes, and still do. Is that instead of attempting to become the thing that I saw, in large part, I just sort of pretended to be there, and it robbed me of the kind of step-by-step process of finding persons to ask questions of, and having real mentors, or taking the time to manifest the fact that I have no idea what I'm talking about. That sort of the realization of one's own ineptitude or ignorance that comes with more age has been unwelcomed, but at the same time painful. But at the same time, now I'm so grateful for it. Because one doesn't have to pretend.
Well, yeah, the word that comes to mind when you say that is precocious. Just sort of,
sure.
Like a little 3-year-old presenting herself as a 18-year-old.
And maybe it's a bit more of a problem or a hazard in the priesthood, simply because you all of a sudden at 25, 26 years old, you become a priest, and people that are twice your age call you father.
Right.
So you sort of have to pretend.
You drink the Kool-Aid. You think you're there.
I suppose maybe it's the way for parents too, right? I mean, they have that first child. I mean, they kind of have to pretend as if they know what they're doing.
Well, there is, I think, a matter of just showing up and doing it.
Yes.
You would say that you cultivate it by the doing, and you develop those muscles and things. But at the same time, if you begin to think that you're actually this, strong body, that's
right, when
really you're just kind of a little guy who can lift a weight here and there. Okay, you're not in touch with really how you are. You see yourself and not as you really are, and then life is going to painfully point out to you that you can't lift that weight.
That's right.
At least not twice.
Well, it's funny that our friend Joe Ozog. It was a great lesson that he once taught me. We were bike riding in Park City, and that's where all of the athletes, the Olympic athletes, train, right?
The thin air.
And so we were on a ride, and it was a difficult ride for me, which means that he didn't even notice it, and climbing some mountain. And I remember him saying that you never go peacock, I forget the word that he actually used, but you don't sort of boast or strut in Park City about your athletic prowess, because someone is near you that can destroy you. No matter how good you are, whatever you think is possible, because you can climb this mountain, you can run this hill or whatever. There are Olympians amongst us.
That's right.
And you're not one of them.
So be careful who you brag to.
It's true.
Oh, gosh. I remember, and reading Peggy talk about the three little girls, the three women, Faith, Hope, and Charity, where Charity is, I think, the motherly figure, and Faith is the bridal figure, and Hope is the little girl. And he says that as the three walk along the way, she circles around the hems of their skirts, and wanders off and comes back. And he points out that in the end, when they finally arrive at the end of their journey, that she's walked twice the distance that the other two have, that her little legs have done more of a journey than
it's a beautiful image.
The other two. And he goes on to kind of fill that out. Again, obviously these are images and metaphors. He goes on to say, hope goes where faith and charity often stop. And so it brings up that image of the prodigal son. So you have the son, he abandons charity and love of the father. He abandons selflessness. He will abandon fidelity and faith. But while he's, with the pigs and the swine in a barn, hungering for something to eat, hope is there. Because she traveled to the darkness where charity and faith have long been eschewed. And so her little legs go farther. They go
beautiful.
Deeper. And that hope awakens in him that possibility to return to the Father, where he becomes reacquainted with the fidelity and the love of his Father. And so you can see what he means in this image, where she runs around the hems of the skirts and she wanders off and comes back, that at the end of the journey, at the end of life, faith walked twice, 3 times, 4 times more than...
Faith did or hope did?
I'm sorry, hope did.
Hope did, okay.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. But I didn't have enough coffee. So, no, the hope.
I love that.
The hope walked, 2, 3, 4 times.
I love that. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It is true. I mean, think about it in the course of your own life, right? There are times in which maybe there's a struggle of faith and a struggle with charity and love and selflessness in one's vocation. And it's hope that pulls you back. Hope who sits there in the, in the threshing floor of the barn near the swine and says, you can go back.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, I must away to many things, so perhaps before we go, you have something to share.
Oh, what do we call this? Before we go.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Before we go into senility, talk about memory.
Before I go take my mid-morning nap. It is a Saturday, so we are not dissipating the morning of a work day because, gosh, we were. All right, here's one more thing. I was thinking about my life as a parish priest, and I did not realize at the time how much discretionary time I had. I did not realize at the time how, with all my responsibilities, I still had a heck of amount of discretionary time and a lot of latitude in controlling my life. In the current position in which I find myself, in helping to administrate a diocese, I have time in the margins. And if I had thought about the type of day that I live back when I was a pastor at a big parish, I would have said I could do that maybe once or twice a week. I couldn't do this all the time. And now it's my norm. I'm not saying I'm doing it well, but I'm just saying it's my norm. And it is extraordinary to consider at a given moment where you thought you were busy, you thought you had lots of things to do back when, And with a new role or a new position, you realize, yeah, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I'm busy now.
I think it's hard to live with that kind of RPM, the consistent RPM, as it were. I think you are doing it well. And in some sense, I think it brings out, oftentimes it can bring out, if it's engaging in good things, the best in us, because we've all been in that position of not having quite enough to do, and then nothing gets done.
Yeah, that's true.
The days we're most productive is usually when the day is difficult.
Inertia. An object in motion stays in motion, but an object at rest stays at rest.
Until the bishop says otherwise.
Exactly.
Well, I was fascinated recently by an article. If you think about entropy or this movement toward, I know your language, movement toward like disorder or chaos, etc. The article was talking about synchronicity, and it was a fascinating topic insofar as things that are aligning by, give you an example, fireflies, right? The fireflies are all over the place, right? It's summertime and they're coming out right now and you see them blinking here, there, and everywhere.
Chemiluminescence.
Whatever that is, yeah. But what they end up finding is that they begin to synchronize their blinking. Just because of their proximity.
They do not.
They do.
They're like lighting up runways for the other flies.
They will begin to synchronize
flight patterns.
It's fascinating. So this article was going through various examples like metronomes placed near each other, or the way in which things will pick up even on just vibrations around and synchronize themselves to the vibrations that they feel. So the metronomes, for example, that were on a ship, that the person discovered the clocks that had the movements would begin to synchronize because of the constant movement of the ship.
There's a certain subtleties.
Fascinating to me, because I'm always on this search for what philosophy would call the common good. That is to say, we're not isolated, fragmented individuals, but we're part of something larger. We're part of a whole, which is the thing that sort of grates against the individual and the rugged and radical individualization of the human person that we find philosophically now, that we're part of something more. And people want to be part of something more. I don't want to go back into a larger discussion. We can have this perhaps at another time. But even the fact that because we have bodies, the bodies pick up on things, small amounts of movement and vibration, and will begin to synchronize with the bodies around them. I find that to be very divinely providential and a sign of the common good.
When as I see the sun coming through the window, I think, we're all synchronized around, the orbits and things, the spinning of the earth around time, and the way in which our sleeping habits, and we sleep at night and we wake at day typically. And I mean, it's really interesting to consider all these synchronicities. But it's interesting to consider, are there pure spiritual forces also at play that can create some synchronicity? So could you be at a place where there's something spiritually going on, and could these little spiritual forces have that same sort of effect of, not without you knowing, shifting you and everybody in that house in a direction, and that kind of brings in issues of hauntings.
It's true. I mean, but even when we talked about last time, relative to walking into someone's cloud,
yes,
relative to their unpleasantness or their bad mood, which is still, because passions or feelings, they're still bodily. We're picking up on it, but they're bodily. And where's that bridge to the next level? What are you picking up on when you walk into a room, when you've walked into a cloud of something malevolent, or, on the contrary, something grace-filled?
Yeah.
Perhaps a topic for another time.
Indeed.
Have a great day. God bless you all.
Ciao.
Makes me wanna scream from the rooftop to the screen.
Thanks for listening to this episode of From the Rooftop.
For updates about new episodes, special guests, and exclusive deals for From the Rooftop listeners, sign up at rooftop.podcast.com.
And remember, for more great ways to deepen your faith, check out all the spiritual resources available at tanbooks.com.
And we'll see you again next time
From the Rooftop.